Our system of modern music is based on scales. Scales and the chords created when these scales are harmonized. The most common scale, the most popular scale, the most useful scale, and clearly the most well-known scale is the major scale. If you have ever heard do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, you already know the sound of the major scale. The idea of playing scales, creating melodies based on the scales, and singing words to these melodies is something that modern musicians owe to their ancient counterparts. In the music of ancient Greece, in something called the Greater Perfect System, small four-note passages were called tetrachords, and scales were created by linking various tetrachords together. This term, tetrachords, is still used in modern music theory to describe the two halves of the major scale. For students to truly understand the major scale, they need to analyze it in several different ways. First is the formula, which tells you the distances between the notes. If we look at the mother of all scales, the chromatic scale, we can see all of the notes in the chromatic scale are separated from each other by a distance of 1/2 step. The formula for the chromatic scale would look like this: half, 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 etc. Since a major scale contains 8 notes, where each letter of the musical alphabet is mentioned once, the formula for a major scale is slightly different than an uninterrupted string of half steps. In a major scale, only the notes 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 are separated from each other by a distance of a half step. The rest of the notes are separated by a whole step. The formula for the major scale, therefore, looks like this: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. This is called a major scale. This is 1 octave of the major scale because it has 8 notes. Think of an octagon with 8 sides. Next is the spelling of a major scale, which means the actual letter names of the notes in the scale. For practical purposes, let's begin with the note C. When creating a major scale, we mention each letter of the musical alphabet once. In the case of C, let's begin with these notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. When we apply our formula of half steps and whole steps to create the C major scale, we must check and consult with the mother of all scales, the chromatic scale, and we arrive at the same sequence of the same 8 notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. These 8 notes are also called degrees, or scale degrees 1 through 7. If you will notice, all of the notes in the C major scale are separated from each other by the distance of 1 whole step, except for the 3rd and 4th and 7th and 8th, which are separated from each other by the distance of 1/2 step. So, when we look at our formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, we have indeed created a C major scale. This C major scale has the exact same formula as any other major scale we could come up with, but it has its own unique, one-of-a-kind series of notes. Its spelling. The spelling of the scale makes the scale unique. There is only one scale spelled C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and that is C major. It is easy to apply the formula to the C major scale because we don't need any flats or sharps. We don't need any black keys, just white keys, just natural notes. And just because we don't need any of the flats or sharps. So it is therefore said, the key of C major has no flats and no sharps. That's the reason why we always use the C major scale to introduce or discuss any new theoretical concepts. It's just the easiest key to think in. If we started on a note other than C and wanted to construct a major scale, G for example, we will place all the members of the musical alphabet in order and use them all once, and it will look like this: G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We have not yet, however, constructed a G major scale because the order of half steps and whole steps has been altered. It's off. The distances between the scale degrees are wrong. Scale degrees 3 and 4 are separated by a half step, all right. The distance between B and C. When we look at degrees 7 and 8, we see it's a whole step, not a half step. Since we have adhered to the rules of music theory and used every letter of the musical alphabet once, we need another type of F note, not an F natural, but an F sharp. When we raise the F to F sharp, we have constructed a G major scale. It can be said that a demand for the F sharp has been created. It is also said that the key of G contains one sharp. Therefore, the key of G is spelled like this: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That is a unique spelling. A unique scale spelling which only occurs in the key of G major. Any of the 12 possible notes in the chromatic scale can serve as the root note of a major scale, and therefore there are 12 possible major scales in the world of modern music. Another word for a scale is a key. That's why you will hear people say there are 12 keys in the world of music, 12 separate and distinct possible major scales. Those 12 separate and distinct major scales have 12 separate and distinct spellings, all requiring various amounts of flats and sharps, but all using the same formula. 12 spellings, 12 keys, 12 different major scales, one formula. As a music student, it is also important that you become familiar with singing solfege syllables and singing them in tune. The solfege syllables represent so much more than just simple names given to scale degrees. Each note in the major scale has its own unique personality, its own job to do, its own function. For example, the first note of the scale Do, also called the tonic, is the one note we most commonly begin and end on, and also resolve a melody or scale passage to this note, Do, the first note or the tonic. Just as the seventh note of the scale, T, called the leading tone, is responsible for bringing your ear back to the tonic, back to Do, back to home base. In conclusion, the major scale, also called the Ionian mode, is the most commonly used scale in modern music, and in fact throughout music history. Pop, rock, jazz, blues, country, and most music from the Western Hemisphere, in fact, is deeply rooted in the major scale and its theory. The major scale also serves as the king of music theory, and all discussions concerning music theory are related to the major scale and the numbers given to its scale degrees. The major scale, also called the diatonic scale, is made up of 8 different notes. The first note and the 8th note share a name, as this last note in the scale duplicates and doubles the frequency of the first note. The first note and the last note of the major scale are separated from each other by the distance of 1 octave. Since a major scale constructed beginning on a C note does not require any flats or sharps, C major is normally the key used for discussing and learning about music theory.